The content of this podcast is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended as, nor should it be considered a substitute for professional medical advice. Hello, this is Karen Nickel, family nurse practitioner, and you are listening to Itchy and Bitchy, a podcast that provides answers to your many unanswered health questions. I want to remind you once again that I have created a comprehensive course to help address the symptoms that so many women experience in their 30s, 40s, and early 50s. I would love to talk to you about the course to see if it's the right fit for you. There's a link on our website, itchyandbitchy.com, and our Facebook page, I&B Podcast, where you can schedule an appointment for a Zoom call with me. Again, this is a Zoom call with me. It is not a webinar. When you make an appointment, I will be sitting at my desk waiting for you to join the one-on-one Zoom call. I have with me David Allen, a brilliant journalist, and even better, my good friend. And today we are going to discuss ...
All right, hemochromatosis.
Hemochromatosis.
We've decided and we've seen online that July is Hemochromatosis Awareness Month. And we thought we would help fuel the awareness about hemochromatosis by discussing it on this podcast today.
And that word just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
With a little practice. And I know that in your practice, you have actually seen cases of hemochromatosis.
I have indeed. I have 4 sisters who had hemochromatosis.
So a lot of personal connection as well.
Yep. And I diagnosed all 4 of them, and
wow.
It was an interesting process. So hemochromatosis, what the heck is it? It is a storage disorder, an iron storage disorder. So you have this disorder and the body absorbs too much iron from whatever you eat or from supplements and starts socking it away in your organs. Not good. Not good. So, and some really serious health problems can arise from this because you're putting iron in your liver, in your skin, in your heart, your pancreas, joints, pituitary gland.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Which is a huge regulator of our hormones.
Sure.
So because it affects so many organs, there can be a lot of problems and a lot of symptoms. But so you've read the symptoms, you know the symptoms. Did you read them and go?
Confused. I'm so confused because I was looking at all of the symptoms, fatigue, joint pain, hair loss, sexual dysfunction. And I said to myself, that sounds like old age to me. Am I right?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I mean, and abdominal pain you can have too, which is like, that could be anything.
Right.
So sorry, people, we don't have super, super specific things, but there is one symptom that would stand out. Mm-hmm. So if you imagine depositing iron in your skin, think of the color of rust. And thusly, your skin becomes really sort of bronzy, orangey, after it's been going on for a while.
An unnatural color.
Yes. You got to either ask that person, is this just a really bad spray tan, or is this the way you look all the time? But it would look sort of like a terrible spray tan. We have some well-known high-level politicians who have that look.
Oh, I hear you.
I won't name anybody.
Okay, I hear you. But that would be the one symptom that you would say you would be most, the biggest red flag, perhaps.
Yeah, it would define it would help you define what the problem is, because the other ones are so general and could be attributed to anything, a lot of different things. So you only get that orangey bronze skin with hemochromatosis or Addison's disease, which is when you don't make any cortisol. John F. Kennedy had Addison's disease. Mm-hmm. So that's why he always had that. He always looked like he was super tan, sort of that orangey tan. So those are the two diseases that would cause that.
So let's be more specific about what causes hemochromatosis.
Well, we have 2 types of hemochromatosis. I think you knew that, didn't you, though?
Yes, but I wanted to hear the medical explanation, as do our listeners.
Okay, so we have primary hemochromatosis and we have secondary hemochromatosis. Primary hemochromatosis is when you carry a genetic factor that predisposes one to have this iron absorption issue. So the gene is called HFE gene, and typically you would need two copies, one from each parent of the HFE gene, two copies, one from mommy and one from daddy, to develop the disease. But even some people who have those two copies don't develop hemochromatosis. So it's not a given that you're going to have this problem if you carry those genes. But in this, you were saying about the statistics in the U.S. What was it you heard?
Somewhere around 1 million people have hemochromatosis in the U.S., men and women.
Yeah. And men, it's predominantly men. It's interesting that I had those 4 sisters, but predominantly men who develop it. But and I know one statistic is 1 in 300. So that's right. 1 in 300 is about 1 million.
Yes,
yeah,
correct.
Same numbers. Woohoo. And people who are most likely to develop this are not only men, but white, Caucasian people. We just don't see it in other types of people. Most people don't even realize they have it because it's such a slow process, to develop to the point where you're developing symptoms. And this complications tend to happen more in men because they're more likely to have things like diabetes.
Yes.
I don't know how true that is anymore, but at least in East Tennessee, I think it's pretty fair and equal in terms of men and women with diabetes. But liver, if you already have liver disease or diabetes, you're likely to have more complications of hemochromatosis if you have that. And you and I were talking earlier that we see it in women. We see it more often after menopause because they're no longer menstruating, so you're no longer naturally losing blood. So once we stop doing that, stop losing blood naturally, then the iron levels can start climbing if you have that genetic predisposition.
You mentioned that you diagnosed it when you were practicing in your sisters, but how is hemochromatosis diagnosed?
So every year, if you go in for your annual physical, which I highly recommend, typically a lab called a CBC, a complete blood count, is done. And that includes looking at your white blood cells, your red blood cells. It looks at something called hemoglobin and hematocrit. And those are, hemoglobin is a protein in your red blood cell that carries the oxygen to your tissues, to your organs, and then it collects carbon dioxide to take back to the lungs to get oxygenated again, right? And hematocrit is the percentage of volume of red blood cells that you have in the blood. So when those two things start rising, if we see that your hemoglobin and hematocrit is becoming higher and higher, and especially if it's over the normal limit or our reference range, over the normal reference range, then at least the way I practice, if I see someone's H&H, hemoglobin, hematocrit, trending upwards or above normal, I automatically bring them back and do an iron panel. And that's where we check the level of iron in the blood. And we also check ferritin, which is a protein inside the red blood cell that stores iron. We check a total iron binding capacity, which checks to see if you have too much or too little iron in your blood. We check a transferrin and a transferrin saturation. And transferrin saturation is really important in diagnosing because it checks on how many places on the transferrin that are available to carry iron. So if those levels are abnormal, then I find out if if that person's having symptoms. If you're catching it early like I did, they typically don't have symptoms. But if I find that those levels are abnormal, then I would offer up genetic testing for that person. People talk about diagnosing it by doing an MRI to check your liver or doing a liver biopsy because it affects your liver so strongly. Honey, I just do my best not to have to get to that point.
Right.
But those are tests that can be done to check the status of the liver. But, just doing a CMP, which is also done at an annual physical, that's a comprehensive metabolic panel. It includes a liver panel. And if your liver enzymes are up, that's a sign that maybe we've already had some iron overload in your liver. So, when you want to check a CBC, a CMP, which would happen at your physical, and if those areas, the liver or the iron levels are abnormal, then you want to look at whether this person is developing or could develop primary hemochromatosis. Yeah.
And a less sophisticated way, perhaps, to diagnose if you may have hemochromatosis is, let's say grandma or grandpa or mom or dad starts saying words or phrases about liver issues or whatever, and they don't have any more information than that. Is that a red flag then for someone who's in that DNA family?
Yeah, because if you're talking to someone who might have a genetic disease, a genese, I made a new word. That's so awesome. I love it. Anyway, who you suspect might have a genetic predisposition for a problem like hemochromatosis, you can say, do you have anybody in your family who's had hemochromatosis? But a lot of times people don't know that information, and they don't know that word. So, you may have had a grandfather or grandmother who said, oh, I remember Aunt Betsy, they told her liver had turned to stone. Well, if you're storing iron in all your organs, so there might be some colloquialisms that people use, or, remember Uncle Joe, how orange he was all the time, looked like a carrot, been eating too many carrots, things like that are clues that maybe somebody in the family did have hemochromatosis, because they might describe the symptoms or what the diagnosis ended up being, like your liver turning to stone, but they don't have the official name for that diagnosis. So those are also things as a provider you really need to be listening for and asking about. So we have just shot out a bunch of fantastic information, and right after this break,
we have more.
There's always more after the break. Isn't that weird?
Yes.
And we are going to talk about how hemochromatosis is treated and if it can be treated. So stay tuned to hear that answer. My parents traveled with me and my 4 siblings. Yes, indeed, 5 children. They traveled with 5 children all over the U.S. and outside of the country. Through these travel experiences, I received an early introduction to different cultures from my own. Now, thanks to KiwiCo, your kids can learn about other places and cultures by exploring KiwiCo's Atlas Crate. If you want to encourage creativity and a love for learning in your children, a KiwiCo crate is a must. Each month, KiwiCo delivers crates that cover lots of interesting topics that allows for exploration of everything from engineering robots to cultures around the world. It is important to me to know that the school-age children in my life will develop an appreciation of other world cultures, and the Atlas Crate is designed to do just that. If you want your children to connect with communities and customs beyond their own experience, the Atlas Crate from KiwiCo will help them explore the globe. With KiwiCo, your children's screen time can be reduced, and they will have the excitement of receiving a kit in the mail each month that contains a fun and creative activity. And the kit comes with everything needed to start the project right away. Help your child be a creative creative, imaginative, and self-confident thinker. KiwiCo makes it easy, and there's no commitment, so you can pause or cancel at any time. Redefine learning with play. Explore hands-on projects that build creative confidence and problem-solving skills with KiwiCo. Get 50% off your first month plus free shipping on any crate line at kiwico.com/itchy. That's 50% off your first month at kiwico.com/itchy. Welcome back, everyone. Before we get started on treatments for hemochromatosis, I also want to remind people of the risk factors for developing hemochromatosis as a secondary disease.
Sure.
People who don't have the gene, the HFE gene, just your average Joe. Things that can put you at risk for hemochromatosis are alcohol dependency, family history of diabetes, heart disease, liver disease. That's another clue. It's like so-and-so
Sure.
had liver disease, da-di-da. If you're taking iron supplements when you really don't need iron supplements, or you're taking vitamin C supplements, which aids the absorption of iron. Like, you may not even be taking iron supplement, but you're taking vitamin C and it's just enhancing the absorption of iron. Frequent blood transfusions, if you're getting blood put in your body, if nobody's monitoring, I'm sure they would be, but if they're not monitoring closely iron levels, you could get high levels of iron in your body. And also in testosterone replacement in men, because men have much higher testosterone levels than women, when we replace it, it gets the levels pretty high. And when that happens, the hematocrit and the hemoglobin can start elevating. And those people, we just send for phlebotomy every 2 or 3 months, depending on what their hemoglobin and hematocrit levels are. If they want to stay on the testosterone or lower the testosterone dose. There are several ways to address that. But if you're taking testosterone, it's possible that you might be getting too much iron stores in your body. So that's just something to be really aware of. So, David, do you know how we treat hemochromatosis?
I do know that July is Hemochromatosis Awareness Month.
Yes.
Which is why we're doing this podcast
Indeed.
on it. And we need to discuss right now treating hemochromatosis.
Right.
How do you treat it?
Yeah. But do you have any clue? If you have too much blood in your body, too much iron on your blood cells?
I think you're onto something.
I think we've discovered a new treatment.
We may have.
Yeah, so we do phlebotomy. So we just take blood out of you to lower the red blood cell count and the iron on the red blood cell. So that's what we do. And typically, once the levels have gotten down, we usually do phlebotomy pretty frequently, like even every few days or once a week. Initially, depending on how high your iron levels are, to get that level down. And then usually it ends up on a every 2 to 3 month schedule. Typically, a hematologist would manage that. If I had a patient I knew needed regular phlebotomy, I turn that patient over to a hematologist, someone who specializes in blood diseases, who also is an oncologist, hematologist. So I turn that over to them to manage it. But sort of nice that you're not having to take another pill or do something like that to treat it. You just have to have blood taken out.
So there is no prescription or a pill for the treatment of hemochromatosis.
No, it's all about taking away. You take away some blood. You take away sources of iron. So rather than adding things like we normally do in medicine, we actually take things away to fix it. There is an option to do chelation therapy. I don't know of a lot of providers in my area who do chelation therapy, but it is an option if there's some major contraindication to doing phlebotomy. Say you are so anxious, you can't have anybody draw your blood because you're so anxious. that might be an indication for chelation, or there are some people where it's really, really, really hard to access their veins to draw blood. There are just some people that it's really difficult, and it's very traumatic when people are sticking you 5, 6, 7 times to make it happen. So someone like that who either is just absolutely terrified of blood draw or is a really difficult, what we call a difficult stick, somebody is really difficult to access a vein, then chelation might be a thing. And with chelation, you can do either injections or pills. And chelation just helps your body expel excess iron in the urine and stool. So it just helps you get rid of it through excretion of urine or stool. But there can be pain. There can be side effects like pain at the injection site. Some people get flu-like symptoms. So the ideal treatment is the phlebotomy, but there is that option if phlebotomy is absolutely not an option for you. So that is an option.
The journalist in me wants to ask this question. It feels appropriate right now. What about complications if there is no treatment? It seems fairly simple, the blood draw, for those who can manage that.
Yeah.
But what are the complications, either if you don't know you have hemochromatosis or you aren't diligent in the way you treat it?
Well, as I said earlier, when we have too much iron, we start storing it in our liver, our pancreas, our heart, our joints, our skin, our adrenal glands, our reproductive system. So with liver, you're going to end up with liver damage. And sometimes it's bad enough that you need a liver transplant. So we'd like to catch these things early so we can avoid this. And you can have pancreatic damage. And the pancreas is key in terms of regulating our insulin and our blood sugar. So if you have pancreatic damage, it could lead to diabetes, joint pain. With a joint damage, you could have pain like arthritis, joint stiffness. I mean, your joints turn into stone thinking about that. They just don't function well. You can end up with heart problems like irregular heartbeats. You can end up with heart failure. Again, the skin discoloration. You look like you're covered in rust. Damage to the adrenal glands. I mentioned that adrenal glands can be affected. And your adrenal glands regulate your wake-sleep patterns. Cortisol is secreted from your adrenal glands, and it's our natural anti-inflammatory. So it's a key part of our immune system. So, and then if it's also iron getting deposited in the pituitary gland, our pituitary gland is our huge hormone regulating organ. So that gets all screwed up. And also, again, the problems with the reproductive system, you can get erectile dysfunction, you get menstrual irregularities because the iron's getting deposited in those organs as well. It's crazy.
Wow. I'm wondering about, are there lifestyle changes that people can make that can either improve the condition if they have hemochromatosis, or are certain lifestyle changes, can you possibly prevent the secondary
if you've been diagnosed even with the primary hemochromatosis, there are things you can do to prevent further damage to your organs, and so not only slow it but stop that damage by lowering your iron levels. So obviously you want to have your iron levels monitored regularly. Some people will do that annually. I would do it every 3 months, sometimes every 4 months, depending on a pattern that I've seen on previous labs. And because some people with a diagnosis you don't feel really until it's further along.
Right.
You might think, oh yeah, I forgot I was diagnosed with hemochromatosis, and I'm supposed to be getting blood drawn. I just totally forgot about it. Yeah,
no.
That happens. Yeah, that happens. So so you want to get your blood iron levels checked on a regular basis, at least annually. You want to avoid multivitamins that contain iron or just straight up iron supplement. You want to, again, avoid vitamin C supplements that would enhance the absorption of iron. You want to avoid alcohol, and that's sort of a secondary thing because alcohol can be so destructive to the liver. If you have hemochromatosis, you're already, working on goofing up your liver. So you don't need more things that will stress your liver. Your liver, you got to love your liver. Your liver's a good thing.
Your liver's a lover.
Is it? So it is, and you should love your liver.
Love your liver. Okay,
okay. Just remember that. If you remember nothing else from this podcast,
love your liver.
And you want to try to make sure do your best to avoid infections. Get your regular vaccinations. Wash your hands. All the things that we learned during COVID. Wash your hands regularly. Avoid shaking hands if you can. Continue the fist bumps and elbow bumps that we've done during COVID. So you want to really avoid infections. And take some self monitoring of your iron levels in control. So when you get your labs, make a log, a spreadsheet, or even on just a piece of paper, what your iron levels are looking like so you can see a trend. So that in case the trend is overlooked, you can see a trend. Are my iron levels staying steady? Are they getting lower? Are they getting higher? So you have a flow sheet of your iron levels. Take responsibility for your treatment too,
When you go to see the doctor and they ask for a list of the prescription drugs you're on, should you also mention to your doctor that you take certain vitamins?
Oh, yeah. You should always tell, when you give a med list, they request a med list, you should always tell them any supplements you're taking. That's a very good question, David. You must be a journalist.
Well, I try.
Yeah, I know you do. You don't even need to try. You're an expert. Yeah. So, and the interesting thing is, a lot of times, and I'm not dissing nurses, but a lot of times the nurse will come in and say, "Have any of your medications changed?" And they won't go
down the list. Right.
And oftentimes they won't ask for supplements. Then I come in to the exam room and I end up going through the whole list. And it's amazing what you find out that they've stopped or started or, what they just bought at Walgreens. So yeah, it's a very important question and a very important thing to share with your provider. Because, because that's the other thing is if I have somebody who's has a high hemoglobin and hematocrit and I check their iron levels and it's like maybe slightly elevated or high normal, I'll make sure, I'll go through their supplement list again and say if they're taking anything with iron in it, to stop that, stop high iron foods, iron containing foods, even iron, there's things that are iron fortified in our processed foods. So check labels, stop all those things, come back, we'll recheck it and see if it's made a difference. And if it hasn't, then we go on with the assessment. But yeah, and so you also want to make sure you're doing all your follow-up appointments if you have hemochromatosis. Don't disappear.
Don't cancel and
don't
not
disappear.
reschedule.
Come to your appointments and let your provider know if your symptoms are worsening or changing. And, if it's affecting your life, if you're advanced enough in the disease process that it's affecting your quality of life, let your provider know that too.
Sure.
Because they need to know if you need to have counseling or some kind of, give you some ideas like meditation or exercise or whatever to help your mental health so that you can process this and cope with this better. So it's an important thing. We sort of overlook that.
What's the prognosis here for someone who's diagnosed with hemochromatosis? The look on your face suggests that something's coming.
Well, again, if you diagnose it early and you do all your follow-up and do your phlebotomy as ordered, as prescribed, your prognosis is excellent. We don't see any difference between someone with hemochromatosis and without it in terms of longevity of life. If you already have more advanced disease, it does, depending on how severe it is, it can shorten your life because your organs can't function well when they're, chock full of iron. So, and even to the point, like I mentioned earlier, that you may need a liver transplant if you're not diagnosed early or if you did not follow up with the recommended treatments.
This is just further proof to me that you have to be so disciplined in managing your health, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
It has to be your job, and to be able to be comfortable and to communicate with your healthcare provider, no matter what it is.
Yeah, well, and the nursing model, the patient is at the top of the pyramid. You're supposed to be not diagnosing yourself and self-treating, but you're the captain of the team. Be the captain of the team. As a provider, we're just part of the team. So, that's why I end this podcast every episode. Your health is in your hands. It's in your hands. Yes. And again, I'm not saying you have to diagnose yourself, treat yourself. I'm just saying be an active participant in your health. That's so important.
Well, we said that July was Hematomacrosis Awareness Month.
Yes. Are we aware?
We've made people more aware, sure.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. And it's like I said, it's one of the few diseases where we actually can take away things rather than giving you more treatments, more meds. We actually just take away iron in your diet and take away some blood every once in a while.
Sounds good.
Well, David, thank you so much for being here today with me. And I also want to give many thanks to KiwiCo for sponsoring today's episode. I encourage you to visit our Facebook page, IMB Podcast, where you can leave comments or questions for me. Our website is itchyandbitchy.com. And there are blogs on the site with some of our subjects available for you to read. And you guys need to go out on there and see my website because I posted 3 or 4 new blogs the other day. It'd been a while, so I was afraid I wouldn't remember how to do it, but I did it. On the Facebook page and website, we have the information about how to schedule the appointment with me. Again, this is not a webinar, so we can chat about how my perimenopause course can help you if you're going through this phase in life. As always, thanks to Forrest Wenzel, who does everything for this podcast, is the producer and the composer of our theme music. Check out his album called An Awful Lot. Go to wherever you stream your favorite music to listen. And if you don't know where to stream music, you can find the album on Apple Music or Spotify. And remember, your health is in your hands.